Greetings, people. We're going to be reading some George Saunders, who is, he's one of the best. He's one of the best we got who is alive and writing right now. So a little background you're going to want to know is he was awarded in 2017. So Saunders, S-A-U-N-D-E-R-S, Saunders in 2017. Saunders in 2017 was awarded what's called the Man Booker Prize. Man Booker Prize, which goes to the best book in English, as determined by people who care about these types of things and believe that they are right. Best book in English for a book that is called Lincoln in the Bardo. And we might talk about that some more, but we got to talk about postmodernism first. So Saunders is a postmodern author. He's a part of a literary movement. So we have these things that are called literary movements or schools. Literary movements or schools. And sometimes they have different names in different places, and and sometimes they're eras, and sometimes they're ways of seeing the world. In the United States, we've had the realists, we've had Southern Gothic, we've had modernist, and right now we're going to talk about the postmodern. Other literary movements we can learn about at different times. But your postmodern is what we're in right now. So we call it postmodernist literary movement, and it basically started in the 1970s and kind of goes until today. So we got 1970s until today. Who's grouped in this postmodernist groups of authors? Well, we're definitely going to have like David Foster Wallace in there. We're definitely going to have Thomas Pynchon in there. You could probably throw like your Zadie Smith writers in there. And here are the different characteristics they have. One of them is intertextuality. That's a great word, isn't it? Intertextuality. Which basically means that like nothing exists in isolation and everything is dependent on everything else. So for example, in Lincoln of the Bardo, that's an extremely intertextual book, because even though he wrote it in 2017 or 2018, I really wish I knew about this date here, it references back to the Civil War, and it even has in it real and fake little citations from publications that were written while Lincoln was still alive. So it's like the past is with us right now. Looking back on the past, it's tough to separate out what's our opinion of the past. So texts have relationships. No text is an island, I guess is what we could say. No text, an island. And some of the texts that are the focus are not things that you might usually consider a text. So text includes things like fashion, and include things like architecture, or like, yeah, okay, I'll just leave it at that for now. So we got intertextuality. We've got extreme self-awareness to the point of like self-consciousness. So right now what I'm talking about is like, what is postmodernist? What is postmodernism? What are the characteristics of postmodernist literature? These are the type of questions I'm asking and trying to answer. So characteristics 1 is intertextuality. Characteristic 2 is self-awareness. Like to the point of like self-consciousness. Like when David Foster Wallace goes nuts on his endnotes or footnotes and starts saying things that are like embarrassing about his past and his relationship. He's not sure about all this stuff. That's like extremely self-aware. The other thing you have is pastiche. The ultimate number one most awesome style of postmodernist literature is rap music. Because rap music is the mastery of pastiche, where you take a beat that was created in 1970, you put different words with it, you put contemporary references, and you make something new. Pastiche is like a collage. And then the other thing you have is this fragmented self. Like sometimes I act in certain ways. So these are a bunch of things that the postmodernists believe, I think M-O-D-E-R. These are a bunch of things that postmodernists believe to be true. So this postmodernist could also be called a worldview, or almost like an ideology. In fact, some people would complain about the postmodernist ideology. And so let's see how this story fits in with ideas of intertextuality, self-awareness, pastiche, and collage and fragment. I'm just going to read it out loud in chunks. Every once in a while I might talk about some stuff, and we'll go from there. Elizabeth always thought the fake stream running through our complex was tacky. Whenever I'd sit brooding beside it after one of our fights, she'd hoot down at me from the balcony. Then I'd come in and we'd make up. Oh, would we? I think of it, and think of it. Finally, in despair, I call guilt masters. So it's like, well, what's going on with this sentence right here? Finally, in despair, I call, how does this relate to what comes before it? Well, what comes before it is really called stream of consciousness. It's like we're in the dude's brain. We're inside his head as he's having a stream of thoughts, and then all of a sudden he has to take action. So this kind of narration is like, who's the narrator? Is it a narrator? Is it omniscient? Is it first person? Well, it's first person, but it's called stream of consciousness because it is in the moment. So it's not past tense. This is past tense. Whenever I'd sit, then I'd come. Oh, would we? I think of it. So I did think of it, or I would think of it. I think of it. Finally, in despair, I call. So here we're caught up. So this is kind of like past tense, but overall for our narrator, we have got a first person, and the stream of consciousness is like the style, stream. So stream is like it's just running. There's also a reference to a stream right there, but I don't think that's key. Stream of consciousness means like running thoughts. Like I'm going to invite you into my brain while I just sit here and move through my life, and I'll take you for the ride. So that's kind of like stream of consciousness is kind of like stream of consciousness, just kind of like thoughts in action is a style, and it started with modernists, but it's also used in postmodern literature. Finally, in despair, I call guilt masters. Guilt masters are Gene and Bob Fleen. So first thing you might notice, Bob Fleen, that's a funny name. Gene Fleen and Bob Fleen, that's funny. So also in postmodernists, you have a lot of irony, and also kind of like a detached, like irony, absurdity. So this is kind of absurd, right? The guilt masters are Gene and Bob Fleen, a brother-sister psychiatric practice. So psychiatric practice get people help for whatever they're struggling with, but they dress up in weird costumes. In their late-night TV ads, they wear cowls and capes and stand on either side of a sobering, neurotic woman in sweater and slacks. By the end of the bit, she's romping through a field of daisies. All right, so this is an advertisement. So the intertextuality is like this. Into the story comes the absurdity. Absurd is just ridiculous. Like absurdity of like the TV advertisement as a genre of meaning, as like you could study it and understand it. So advertisement genre, so this is intertextuality because it connects the current text, which we don't know what it's about yet, but this kind of thing is or was familiar, particularly in 1996 when this text came into being. So I want to put intertextuality here as like this is an example of intertextuality, and we'll see more as we move through the story. So we got Jean and Bob fleeing. All right. I tell her I've done a bad thing I can't live with. She says I've called the right place. She says there's nothing to be shameful. It can't be addressed by guilt masters. So notice also, like, that's like consumer. Oh, that's another thing for postmodernists. Postmodern is very interested in what we call like a consumer landscape mindset ideology. Landscape / mindset / ideology, where what really matters is like, what can you buy? What can you brand? Can you sell it? How much money does it cost? Can you afford it? Like being like the dominant thing that moves people through life. Like, I'm a consumer. Compare that to like past, where like religion might have been like the most important thing. Or you could look at the combination of a consumer mindset and a religious landscape, which would be something definitely to think about in 2010, 2015, 2020. I take a deep breath and spill my guts. There's silence from Jean's end. Then she asks, can I hold? Upbeat music comes on. Several minutes later, Bob comes on and asks, can they call me back? I wait by the phone. 1 hour, 2 hours, all night. Nothing. The sun comes up. Brad from Complex Grounds turns on the bubbler and the white water begins to flow. So this is his apartment building. So can your apartment building be a text? Text, apartment building? And then like, what are the characteristics of that building? Well, this one has a fake stream. That was some like conflict between the protagonist and his wife. We don't understand what kind of conflict it was, but when he was thinking about her, he seemed to recall something that he did that he could not take back. The sun comes up. Brad from Complex Grounds. I don't shower. I don't shave. I put on the same pants I had on before. It's too much. 3 years since her death, and still I'm a wreck. So she is dead. Still I'm a wreck. I think of fleeing the city. I think of working on a shrimper or setting myself on fire downtown. Instead, I go to work. So that's that consumer ideology where it's like, what am I here to do? Well, I don't know, so I might as well just work, because that's what people do. They just work. In spite of my problems, personal interactive holography marches on. So this is kind of like a tone thing. That's like a joke, like, let's say if you didn't, so like, question is like, does he mean this? So because we're in his mind, is like, is he really like inspired or bound by his job to his duty, or is this really irony? Irony is when you say something but you don't mean it. Like if I work at a hot dog stand and I hate my job and I don't think it's very important, and someone comes up and they say, how are you doing? And I say, I'm just doing the most important job in the universe. That's irony, because it's the opposite. But you have to be able to read it correctly. So finding irony is being able to read irony is huge just for being a good reader. It means you can read the tone. All morning, I hopefully dust. Nobody comes in. At noon, I work on a little tension by running amok in one of my modules. So now we're going to get information about these modules, like what are they? What do they do? I choose bowling with the pros. A holographic smoothie in a blazer greets me and affably asks if I'm as tired as he is of perennially overhooking the ball, when what I really need is to consistently throw strikes. So this is some kind of interactive holography, which you said right there, interactive holography. Holography coming from hologram. This is some kind of VR that he imagined existing in 1996, which doesn't sound too different than things that might actually exist in 2019, because that's the way the world works. I tell him, bad word, in a more sophisticated module, he'd ask why the hostility, but my equipment is outdated, and instead he looks confused and tries to shake my hand. What crappy verisimilitude. This is a word that's big for George Saunders, and also pretty big for like his critique of our consumer society, which basically means verisimilitude means like, does it mirror real life? Does the text, so now he's in another text here. He's inside a text that's imagined that is an opportunity for him to interact with like a virtual AI type of a thing. Think Siri, but not a very good one, because a good Siri, like you picked up your phone and be like, oh Siri, I'm sad. And then Siri would go, tell me about your problems. And then you'd go, tell about your problems. And then she'd say something that made sense. Verisimilitude means like an accurate simulation of reality. An accurate simulation of reality. So what's going on here? Technology and the individual, technology and society. These are big. So if you're saying, what's the theme in this one? Well, definitely something about technology and individual. But also, as we read deeper, we'll find it has something to do with memory and identity. That is spelled very wrong. Spelled like I said it, not like I spelled it. No wonder I'm in the red. In the red, you will not understand the story. It's right here. In the red means like business. When you have business, you know, like you're like this is breaking even. When you're in the red, that means that it's a problem. That means you're spending more money than you're making. And you want to turn things around and go into the black. Because when you're in the black, you're making money. You're making less money, but you're still making money when you're in the black. Right now, he's in the red. That means he's losing money on what we're going to find out is a franchise. Franchise. And many of the businesses that you go to in 2019 are franchises, which really means it's like a text that was someone bought permission to create the text. Think about like a McDonald's restaurant. All the symbols that you see, that's the kind of thing that's like postmodern writers are really interested in things like that. Like franchise as a text, or like, I'll just keep reading. No wonder I'm in the red. No wonder my rent's overdue. He asked, isn't bowling a lovely recreation? I tell him I'm in mourning. He says the hours spent in a bowling alley with friends certainly make for some fantastic memories years down the line. Interesting choice, because this kind of the whole story is about memories years down the line. George Saunders, like I said, you're not going to find better writers explaining reality, which is kind of freaky because his stories are always freaky. I tell him my life's in the crapper. He grins and says, let's bowl. Let's go in and bowl. Let's go in and bowl a few frames with the pros. So this is like the text, like you can see the character of what, like how the person interacts with the AI, and the voice that was the author's voice like becomes the voice of this AI bowling pro. I take him by the throat. Of course he dysfunctions. A student actually mentioned when I was talking about this that this dysfunction is capitalized. Why was it capitalized? Probably because it's like an official error from the machine. Like this is like an error code. It's a good thing to notice. That also becomes part of the texts. Codes. Of course, I'm automatically unbooted. I doff my headset and dismount the treadmill. Once again, it's just me and my failing shop. Once again, the air reeks of microwave popcorn. Once again, I am only who I am. Which gives you the sense that while he was in that simulation, he felt for a while like maybe he was someone else. And maybe that gets to like a big theme that's in postmodern literature, but certainly in this story, is like, when am I myself? Shakespeare wrote sonnets about that, about being yourself. Can you be yourself? When am I myself? Big postmodern thing. Wonderful. I think you've found your own $400 module, and I have. So I trash it. I write it off to grief management. I go to lunch. I opt for an auto-dispensed Frankfurter. So you can see, again, this is like this commercialization of language. This is This is like a thing, that would have a little trademark on it, Of course, I microwave the paper cow catcher, melds with the bun, and a little engineer's face runs down his overalls. It's even more inedible than usual. I chuck it. I can't afford another. So with all this technology is happening, we do have there's a lot of feelings going on here. There's a lot of this guy's feelings. And you're kind of being twisted to feel sorry or empathy. So there's a lot of little tricks, like as we're doing these activities with him, he just keeps failing over and over. He's failed at 4 different things in a row. And so the guy, empathetic, you feel bad that he has had these failures. And that's 20 minutes, so I'm done talking about this story for now. How's it end? What does that all mean? Oh no! Well, it probably has something to do with these big things right here. Intertextuality, self-awareness, pastiche, fragmented identity, irony and absurdity, consumer landscape. But the thing about Saunders has got a huge heart. So whenever you're reading him, he gets all this messed up with all this different stuff over here. But Saunders has a huge heart.